quiet corners of the world, darkness often lurks unnoticed. We go about our lives, oblivious to the dangers that silently creep into our routines. But what if the person standing behind you, just out of sight, is someone you should fear? A serial killer could be anyone, anywhere, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. In the blink of an eye, a normal day can turn into a nightmare, and the ordinary can become terrifying. Trust no one, and be wary, for danger wears many faces. Welcome to Sterling Short Stories. Step inside the story, but only if you dare. I can still hear the sound of her screams, faint, almost as if they're coming from the edges of my mind, but vivid enough to make my heart quicken. That's how it always starts. The rush, the noise, the thrill of it. But it wasn't always this way. No, it wasn't always so primal. It was once clean, simple. The first time, it wasn't about the blood. It was about the fear. I didn't choose to be this way. I didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a monster. Monsters don't get a choice. It was something that seeped into me, little by little, until it was all I knew. There was no defining moment. It was like the slow spread of a disease, until you're too far gone to be saved. I was born in the darkest corner of a broken home. My father was a shadow. My mother, she was like the moon, beautiful, but distant, always so out of reach. My mother would sit by the window, staring out, lost in a world I couldn't see. I'd try to speak to her, but she never heard me. When I was 8, she stopped coming home altogether. My father never cared to explain. In fact, he barely noticed when I started staying out late, wandering the streets, feeling the cold air bite into my skin. It started small. At first I'd just watch people. I'd sit on the edge of alleyways, and I'd study them, how they walked, how they talked, the way their eyes darted around, the nerves that showed in their hands. I saw their vulnerability, and I wanted to know what it felt like to be the one in control. So, I began to follow them. At night, when the city was quiet and the streets were empty, I'd slip through the shadows, following someone home. My footsteps muffled by the sounds of the world asleep. It felt exhilarating, the thrill of being unseen, of knowing I was so close to them. But it wasn't enough. It never was. The first one was a woman, a mother, probably in her mid-30s. She didn't know I was there, but I watched her for weeks. I learned her routine, the way she'd leave her house every Thursday night to go to the store. She was so predictable. I could have told you exactly where she'd be at any given moment. I remember the night I finally did it. It wasn't a thought, it was an impulse. She had just walked out of her house, humming to herself, the door clicking shut behind her. It was then that I did something I hadn't planned for. I slipped behind her, quick as a shadow, and I grabbed her. I pressed my hand over her mouth before she could scream. I'll never forget the way her eyes widened when she realized what was happening. The fear, it tasted sweet. For a moment, it felt like all the emptiness I'd felt in my life was finally being filled. I didn't want her to scream. I wanted to hear her silence, so I tightened my grip, and I pulled her into the alley. Her body was soft, fragile, like the dolls my mother used to collect. And then I did it. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel anything. Just the weight of her body in my hands, and the rush her life drained out of her so quickly that I almost didn't have time to savor it. But I did. I took my time. I couldn't stop. And that's how it started. One after another, they fell. The women, the men. The thrill was never the same, but I couldn't stop myself. They never knew I was there. They never saw me coming. There were dozens, hundreds even. I lost count after the second year. I started planning them out, becoming more precise. I learned the art of concealment, how to make them vanish, how to erase every trace of myself from the scene. I wasn't sloppy anymore. I was an artist, and my canvas was the world. The city was my playground, and I was the only one who understood its rules. But I was getting cocky. I began to feel invincible, and that's when it happened. She was different. Her name was Emily. She was a teacher, kind-hearted and beautiful, just like the others. But there was something about her that caught my attention. I followed her for weeks, but unlike the others, Emily noticed me. She began to look over her shoulder, watch her back, even when she was with friends. At first, I thought it was just paranoia, but then, one night, she turned and caught me. I froze. The rush was still there, but this time, there was fear, a real fear. "Are you following me?" she asked, her voice steady but trembling. I couldn't speak. For the first time, I felt vulnerable. It was like she saw through the mask I wore. I didn't know what to do. My heart pounded, but I didn't run. I couldn't run, and then, something incredible happened. Emily smiled. Not a scared smile, but one that was knowing. "I see you," she said. "I see all of you." It was as though she already knew everything. Everything about me, about what I'd done. And that was when I realized Emily wasn't afraid. She wasn't scared of me at all. She was the one who had been hunting me all along. "You thought you were the predator," she said, taking a step closer, "but you've been the prey, all along." I didn't understand. I couldn't comprehend. How could she know? And then she pulled out a knife. I thought I'd been the one in control, the one who held all the power. But in that moment, I understood. Emily had been following me, studying me, just as I had studied so many before her. I thought I could fight back, but I was wrong. She had already beaten me, and as the cold metal sank into my flesh, I realized I wasn't going to escape this time. But just before everything went dark, I heard her whisper, "I've been waiting for this." And then, there was nothing. The police found my body 3 days later. They called it a botched attack, a struggle gone wrong. But Emily was never found. There was no trace of her, not a single lead. I used to be the one who made people vanish, but then I was the one who disappeared. I was a small fish in the grand scheme of things. She made quick work of me. I guess it's pretty ironic that the hunter became the prey. I had done it for so long, and never gotten caught. The truth be told, I thought I was invincible. Boy, was I wrong. And it wasn't until after I was gone that they started putting the pieces together. My first victim, the trail of bodies, and they realized too late. But in reality, there was a much worse monster, much bigger, more calculated, and she was still at large. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to Sterling Short Stories on YouTube, but only if you dare.